All right, we're back Monday night as usual here for the AMA, where we run it down, all the stuff that you guys want to know over here in the chat on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, on all the other platforms, TikTok included. We're going to run it down tonight, give you guys what you're looking for, talk about all the fun macro events and everything that's going on in the space. But before we get into that, shout out to Crypto Maniac. He asked for shout out, so figured I'd give you one. We got a lot of good people. A lot of good people DM me, message our team, ask good questions. If you haven't done that, hopefully it's been a positive interaction for you. I think that it would be. If it's not, let me know, and I will fix that for you. But we try to make sure we get back to everybody across all the social media platforms. And if you do have any specific questions about all the services that we provide, the support emails are going to be your best bet, whether that's support at Digital Wealth Partners or support at Digital Family Office. Both of those will get you to the right people. And if it's not the right person, they will pass you to the right people to get those questions answered. Starting things off tonight, we do have two big events for the mind here in 2026, already up and going, Luma events. And one of those is for John Deaton up there in Boston. We've got Mikkel and many of the other people that are associated with us going to be at that event. So if you are part of the mastermind, or if you want to go and support John, I think he would very much appreciate it. So we have the Luma event for those people in the mastermind. That is a mastermind event if you want to attend it. The other one is in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got that on St. Paddy's Day with Canary Capital and another one of our portfolio companies that we've invested in through the mastermind. And it's going to be a huge event. We've already got, I think, almost 600 people registered for that event there in Nashville. So lots of things moving and shaking here in 2026 already. If you're part of the mastermind, if you're not part of the mastermind, go check it out. You can go to beyondbroke.com, use code beyondbroke, all capitalized, #1, and then MO gets you the first month for a small discount. We are closing social membership after this month. We've got over 18,000 members there in the mastermind, and so the social tier will be closed. All the people that are in social will get to stay in social, but anybody coming in after this month will be in Carbon 1 or higher, which is more expensive, obviously. So if you want to check it out, test the waters, see if it's something you want to be part of, get access to all the in real life events and all the other fun stuff we do there. I think this month would be, again, no rush tonight or anything, but like the end of the month, or if we see a $10 XRP in the near future, then we will be locking it down completely at that point. We also have another private dinner tomorrow here in Dallas. If you want more information about that, if you are in town, if you're in Dallas and you want to participate, you can just reach out again, support at Digital Family Office, and our team there will get you the links and everything if you want to participate and come to the private dinner that we have tomorrow night. Uh-oh, my wonderful wife with the tea.
That's one of those fancy ones.
Hey, fancy tea. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. And then I'm just going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room before we get going tonight. We did, unfortunately have to sue Zach Rector. Dropped that case on Friday of last week. And I'm not going to avoid any questions here. Happy to answer those. However, I don't want that to become what this is about. We want to focus on all the things that we usually talk about here. So if one of those questions comes up, somebody pays a super chat, I will address it. But at the end of the day, it's a legal process. We're going to have to go through that. If you want more information about the lawsuit, what we're doing with that, it is public record. It's filed there in Washington, and you can go read all of that. And obviously, we wouldn't file it unless we were confident that we have a very strong case. Our attorney represented Johnny Depp in his defamation lawsuit. And so should be interesting. I will say that. So anyway, again, if you have questions about it, we will answer them. But I want the focus of this to be the normal deal: AMA, estate planning, taxes, all the fun stuff. All right, let's jump into the super chats that we got tonight. I don't see any burning questions. Oh, here's one. Here we go. We've got 19 trades. They say watched John Morgan versus 20 people. A question asked if justifiable to be a billionaire while millions live in poverty. Some seemed resentful, believing the rich should solve other people's problems. Thoughts? It's actually a really interesting question. There are a lot of wealthy people that do a lot of really good things in society and never take any recognition for it. I think that, there's always going to be a discrepancy, right? Pareto principle says that 20% of the production of any system, 80% of the production of any system is going to come from 20% of the input. So 20% of the population is always going to create 80% of the value. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just a principle, of reality. I think that, like Elon Musk and many others, if you generate significant value in society, you should be compensated for doing so. And in doing that, hopefully you are changing lives. You're doing something, you're creating something, you're providing value in a way that actually uplifts other people, raises their standard of living. Look at Starlink, right? He's giving access to the internet globally. It doesn't matter where you are. That's pretty freaking cool. He's building humanoid robots. There's a ton of stuff that Elon is doing that I think will actually improve society. NVIDIA, the compute power that they've been able to put into a chip, that's the technological advancements that have been possible because of that. Look at Facebook, look at Google, look at all these large tech companies that have happened over the past 20 years. The founders of those companies have made a lot of money, and they have to change the world for the better. So, if you're saying just because you have this much money, you should be helping people, you really don't get that much money without helping a lot of people. It really just doesn't happen unless you make a strategic investment in one of those companies or in an opportunity like digital assets, right? You could argue that people that invested in Bitcoin early fostered the technology and got it to scale. And now we have all of these other, fantastic blockchain applications, protocols, decentralized networks and things, smart contracts. They're going to create huge amounts of efficiency in society. And they were a capital partner early on in that. Same thing, people that invested in Uber or people that invested in some of these other large companies that have been prolific, Amazon. If you participate in that ecosystem and you help them generate value, you deserve upside in those things. And that's capitalism, right? So, I think with the advent of AI and a lot of these other technologies, we're going to see exponential advancement in things, and it actually is going to increase the standard of living across the globe for society as a whole. Now, there is always going to be a disparity between the wealthy and the poor, but the quote unquote poor, their standard of living can come up a lot. And I think that it will. I think that we're about to enter a period of prosperity here in the U.S. With these technological advancements that cause significant deflationary pressures. And as they move back to sound money, you're going to see people's standard of living significantly increase. Their, ability to save money will be back to what it was before 1971. I think that the U.S. is going to go to, gold-backed treasuries. Judy Sheldon's already talked about this for July 4th this year. We saw the 589 bulb, 2026 ball drop there in New York. Just a lot of things that make me very hopeful for the near future. And right now, there is a huge disparity between those that are barely making it by, living paycheck to paycheck because of the perverted fiat system that we live in, where there's been a cycle that's transpired over every reserve currency, and ours is no different. They start out with sound money. They're the largest creditor nation. There's prosperity. They're producing a lot of GDP and value over time. In order to be able to protect that, position, they have to enhance their military, and they will then, go to war and do things, and they have to print more money. In order to do that, at some point, their printing outpaces what they can actually back, and they start to devalue their currency. And then at some point, they will completely devalue their currency, and people start to lose trust in it. And so then they will go after resources to be able to back that. We're at that point now with Venezuela and everything that's going on. The US is absolutely trying to aggregate as many resources as they can to be able to restabilize the trust in our currency. There's still going to be a transition. I don't think that the US is going to lose its supremacy anytime soon. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to shift, but I don't think that there will be one reserve currency on the other side of this. It'll be a level playing field where people will get to trust a decentralized system and issue their stable coin or their asset on chain and back it with their resources. And then their monetary policy will either be their benefit or their downfall. There won't be, right now when the US does something, it affects the whole world. If we lower or raise interest rates, print or reduce the M2 money supply, because everybody else is dependent on the dollar. As we shift here and global markets are repriced, and I think that gold will be pegged to oil, there will be stability put back into currencies, which will actually help a lot of people pull themselves out of poverty. You'll be able to actually save money over time. Now, the downside to this, I talked about in a video that we published not too long ago. The opportunities in the asymmetric bets that exist today in this system and the arbitrage that exists out there, it's not going to be that way moving forward. As things revert to the mean, and we do have, AI step in, and 24/7, 365 markets, will actually be 24/5 probably on the stock market. The volatility is going to go way down, and volatility is where the opportunity is. When you have large swings, people lose money and people make money. And unfortunately, hedge funds and institutions are usually the ones that make the money, and retail are usually the people that lose the money. 96% of traders lose. Now, if you are positioned and you're, dollar cost averaging and you're in the market for an extended period of time, you tend to do pretty well. But if you have to exit at the wrong time, let's say, like 2008, there were a lot of people that are going to retire in 2008. And they didn't get to, because 50% of their, life savings that they had in the stock market tanked. That's not good. So I think, as they implement this new system, there's going to be a reversion to the mean, which means, on average, the S&P will do about 10% a year. GDP and economic value and output will increase because of all the efficiencies. Today, the output for GDP is really constrained to capita, or the amount of people that are in the system to be able to produce that value. On the other side of this, with AI agents and, humanoid robots and all these other things that they're coming out with, at scale, it really uncaps total GDP and economic output. And that's why, like, a lot of people that are talking about, XRP's, total market cap not exceeding a certain amount, their constraint is the paradigm that we live in today, and they're not looking at the technological advancements that are right here on the horizon. So anyway, that was way more than you asked for in your question about the rich and the poor, and do the rich have an obligation to help others? I do think, I will say this: when you guys come into a lot of money, because if you're here watching this and you own, certain digital assets, you're going to make a lot of money. And I do believe it is part of your responsibility to be a good steward of that capital and also help others, whether that's in your community or for a specific cause, or if it's just your family. Everybody has their own preference and difference, but at scale, the family offices that we consult for and work with, they are very giving. They want to help others. They want to create value in society. They want to give back. because I mean, let's be real. If you've got hundreds of millions of dollars, after 20 million, like, what else are you going to buy? You bought the houses, you bought the cars, you bought the watches, your you know, the bags, the shoes, whatever it is, you've bought all that stuff. You've been on trips, you've traveled, you have nice food, you have, pretty much whatever you want. Anything beyond that, like, the only way you really gain fulfillment is from helping others. Pay people, pay their bill. You could drive through a drive-through line and get the people behind you, or you see somebody that's struggling, and has multiple kids at the counter, and they're counting change. You just pay for their stuff. Like, that's the cool part about a lot of the things that people are going to have the opportunity to do on the other side of this, and hopefully you pay it forward and help somebody else and brighten their life, because of all the blessings that God has given you. So again, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's the answer I got for you tonight. With Stan 143 says, Old Glory is asking for a home address as physical business address. Won't use registered agent. Does this pose issues with privacy policy, other banks' requirements? Other banks will require the same thing. They're gonna want a mailing address that you're gonna be able to receive mail. That's not public information, right? It's gonna be retained by the bank. So for anonymity's purpose, you should still be fine. If you really wanted to lock that down, you could get a virtual office in Wyoming or whatever state your LLC is registered in. I'm assuming it's registered in Wyoming based on the conversation and the context of what we talk about most of the time here. But if that's the case, you could just a couple $100, $200-300 for a registered agent, or sorry, not a registered agent, but a virtual office there in Wyoming. That is something that we are looking to add to the LLCs in the near future for people to be able to manage their mail. So basically, the mail comes there, it gets scanned, it gets emailed to you. If you want the physical copy, you request it, and then they will mail it to your personal address. So that way, anybody sending mail, sends it there. And then secondary to that, you would be able to use that address again for, your bank account and other stuff. And when you register for things and they ask for, a statement or what do you rent, or like a bill associated with that address, you'll have that virtual office bill that you can share. All right, Honest Aim. And they may ask you for like an electricity bill. That's going to be difficult if they want a utility bill. You could probably also get your cell phone tied to the virtual office address and then be able to provide that bill if the virtual office bill itself will not do. Honest Aim, good to see you. He says, Mr. Legacy, hi to the tea lady. Cheers to you. Good to see you guys. Great piece today about all the talent added this year. Great talented people. We met MaxCon, Aaron, Tom, Carl, and several others. Great people. Thanks for all that you do for us. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Hope you guys are doing well. And yeah, I mean, we continue to add personnel to the team. I think we're at 57 employees, maybe more than that, to be honest with you. I lose track. I will say this, it is wild. I remember the first employee that we hired that I didn't hire. And now there are people that work for us that I haven't talked to. I haven't ever met. But that's part of growth at a rapid rate. You're going to have people in your corporation that you appoint to certain positions and trust to make good decisions when they're hiring other people. And they vet people. We have a full HR team and office at this point, setting up multiple locations here in the US this year. And yeah, just wild to, see the growth. And again, to your point, we're not in this position to be able to help people and provide these services at scale unless we do have really good people, competent people, capable people that have been in the industry and have a significant understanding of digital assets and traditional finance. We are the only people that do what we do here in the US. And really globally, I haven't found another investment advisor that will actually tell you what's going on with your crypto portfolio, be able to custody it, provide solutions around ways to be able to generate returns in a regulated way, access to lines of credit, billing, reporting, compliance, uh, you know, the hedge funds going through its audit right now, the annual audit that you would normally have for a hedge fund at the end of the year. Third party with them is the auditor over there. Securitize is the fund administrator. Cole Mallon and Freed is our attorneys for the hedge fund. We work with other compliance providers in order to make sure that we meet all the regulations and stuff that we have to do in order to maintain our licenses and continue to operate under the purview of the SEC and FINRA. A lot going on over there all the time. And again, very blessed to have very, very good people working for us. Again, without you guys wanting the services and without a fantastic team to be able to provide it, none of this is possible. And I just feel grateful every single day. All right. Next up, we have Chris, my man. He says, Jake, Iran, unrest refocuses the Strait of Hormuz. I'm patient till 2030, XRP at 5K. I'll take it. Fed master account. What's next for Ripple? The Clarity Act. I don't know. We're in the middle of some turmoil in the government here. I don't know what Congress is doing. We had, Eleanor Terrick come out today and say that Senator Bozeman and a few other people have punted till the last week of January. And then a couple hours later, we had Democrats saying that they were marking up the bill to be able to, continue to push it forward this week on Thursday. I don't know. Could it happen? Could they mark it up Thursday? Sure. Could it be kicked out to the end of the month and then the government shut down, push it out even further? Absolutely. If we don't get a markup this Thursday on the Clarity Act, it's highly unlikely that we will see that bill passed really until Q3, Q4 at the earliest, potentially all the way till 2027 or maybe never, depending on how the Democrats, if they win the midterms, position themselves. Obviously, with the previous administration, there was Operation Choke Point and digital assets were not in vogue. And anybody that was participating, in digital assets had problems. We've obviously seen, the change in regime here and bipartisan support or supposed bipartisan support for a lot of this legislation. We did see the Genius Act pass last year for stablecoin, which I did call in 2025. And I did say that the Clarity Act would be pushed to 2026. And yet here we are, still not passed for the Clarity Act. So if they do punt this to the end of the month and they don't get the markup this week, and then they've got to focus on the government shutdown and funding. If the government gets shut down, for what they did at the end of last year, another 40 days, we're now talking about March. Now we got midterms and voting. Nothing's going to get done around that time. They're going to have to, pull everybody in, let everybody get situated again through Q2. And then it'll probably be Q3 before there's any more progress. And it sounds bleak, because we all want regulation for this asset class and we want the adoption and we want all the wonderful things that this administration kind of promised us. Charles Hoskinson coming in hot on Wolf of Wall Street's the other day, talking about really kind of how disappointed he really is with the situation that we find ourselves in. And obviously a lot of his net worth, almost all of his net worth, is in Cardano and what he's built over there with ADA and the foundation and everything else. So, I think that XRP is uniquely positioned to really, it's got a moat right now. And I've talked about this before. I think XRP is going to get the lion's share of the liquidity that would have moved into the broader crypto market when there is a global liquidity crisis, and it's the only option for instant settlement to be able to move things at scale on the back end of markets. Doesn't matter how good the technology is if we don't have clarity around it. And I can tell you, again, we've got NDAs, but one of the things that was stated by R3 when we talked through some things with them was, which of these networks should we probably use to settle between ecosystems. And they said, it's going to have to be something that has clarity and enough liquidity here in the US. Right now, you could try to use Bitcoin. It's got liquidity. It's got clarity here in the US. The settlement time and the cost to settle through Bitcoin are atrocious. Can't scale. Okay, well, let's look at ETH. ETH also has clarity as a commodity here in the US. Also, same problem, not scalable. XRP is the only thing aside from those two that has regulatory clarity as a commodity and not as a security here domestically in the US. It can scale up to 1,500 TPS, and it costs less than a penny to send $1 million. Now, if those are your three options, and you're backed into a corner, and you have to settle markets and be able to move to T+0, what are you going to use? It's XRP. There's no other option when that all plays out. And we were right here on the precipice to this gentleman's point of Iran having problems for oil. Oil is going to spike. When it does, we're going to see the Bank of Japan raise interest rates. And that is going to unwind the reverse carry trade. And US treasuries are going to flood the market because there's going to be a rotation out of US treasuries into Japanese bonds. The only way that the US can combat that is for them to use the stablecoin bill and issue a bunch of stablecoins for these large investment banks to soak up that amount of treasuries flowing onto the market and meet that demand required to be able to stabilize the bond market. Because if they let the bond market implode, it's game over. And that's why they didn't let it unwind in 24 when we started to see the reverse carry trade unwind in August of that year. Because they didn't have the Clarity Act passed. They didn't have a way to be able to generate enough demand to be able to meet that many treasuries flooding onto the market at one time. Japan is huge in all of this. Japan is going to be a key player in the implementation of distributed ledger technology and XRP. Yoshitaka Kitao, who's the principal there at SBI, who is a 10% holder in Ripple and R3, has stated multiple times that XRP is going to be used for settlement between the banks in Japan. You now have the prime minister, the lady prime minister there in Japan, also stating that they are going to implement distributed ledger technology into their financial system, and that is ready to go. You also need a buffer for the FX market when all of this happens, because all of those dollars are going to be sucked out of markets and other currencies out of global markets, pulled down, and then they're going to be rushed through the FX market to swap back to yen to repay those loans. And Uncle Warren has already positioned himself for that. He has $300 billion worth of yen to be able to make those loans out to people that need it at the last second. He's a liquidity provider. And I'm sure that the US government came to him and said, hey, we need you to position yourself accordingly. We know that you like the US dollar and you're making money off these treasuries, but we need you to go buy some yen. So anyway, I've been talking about the domino theory for 21 months here. Hopefully you guys have watched, over here on YouTube. If you're on TikTok or one of the other platforms, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and watch the domino theory, the third iteration I put out about 6 months ago. I just shot a fourth iteration of the domino theory. And hopefully that'll be coming out in the near future there on the channel. Just to reiterate, again, some of the things with Tether and some of the other, components here that are a bit more nuanced and have changed over the progression of things. But again, a lot of the stuff that has transpired in 25, I called in March of 24 that those things would happen. So, again, go back, check that out. I'm okay with being like Michael Burry and being a couple years early. I'd rather be early than, way early than just a few seconds late on this deal. All right, a couple more super chats. We got the bearded boat guy, my man. He says, hey, Jake, how does an LLC get accredited? All the steps, mixed info out there. So an LLC can be accredited through a couple different means. If all of the partners or equity owners in an LLC are accredited, the LLC itself is accredited. So if you and your spouse are the only ones on the cap table of an LLC, and you meet the accredited requirements, which are here in the US, internationally, and in other jurisdictions, they're very different. But here domestically in the US, you need at least $1 million in your total net worth, excluding the equity in your primary residence, or you can qualify through income. And if you're single, you've made at least $200,000 a year for the past 2 years, and you have tax returns for it. Or if you're married, you would have had to have made at least $3,000 for the last 2 years and have tax returns. If you can get your CPA or your accountant or your wealth manager to write you a letter that states you are accredited, then that also works as well. But again, you're going to need to meet that criteria that I just stated. So that's for the individual. The other thing that you can do as an LLC or a corporation to meet the accredited status is you have at least 5 million in assets. So the underlying beneficiaries of the LLC are accredited, or the LLC itself has at least 5 million in assets. That would also make you a qualified purchaser. As an individual, if you have at least 5 million net worth outside your primary residence, you would be a qualified purchaser. And then there's an AP, which that's an acronym for something that escapes me right now. Basically, you have to be a large institution with at least $100 million, managing at least $100 million in order to be an AP. APs can contribute in kind into ETFs, but you have to be an AP or worth at least $100 million in order to be able to do that. Retail and everybody else, too bad, so sad. You're only going to be able to buy it with dollars through traditional markets. So hopefully that gives you, kind of a high level of the different types of accreditations, and then how to meet those for your entity, and in which ecosystems you could participate based on, which one of those statuses you do meet. We got Withstand 143 again. They say, hey, Jake and the Tea Lady, how are you? LLC for my son, 11 years old. Wayne at Laughlin says he can do manager managed operating agreement for him if DFO approves it. How can I get that moving? Yeah, we can do a manager managed. All you'd have to do is change one thing in the operating agreement. It's not very difficult. So yeah, just show them this part of the video where I said that's fine, and they should be able to do it for you over there at Laughlin, who is our paralegal group. If you need an LLC to be able to manage your digital assets, you've got at least $50,000 to $80,000 in current portfolio value. That's about the time we see most people start to look at that. If you're interested in that, again, there's lots of videos that I've put out that talks you through exactly how to do it on your own. You can even go to our page and it talks about it. You want to do a single member, ideally in Wyoming. You get, you want a registered agent, EIN, articles of organization, you get your certificate of good standing, a banking memorandum. The operating agreement is the most difficult piece. You're probably going to have to get an attorney to draft that, even if you do the rest of it yourself. And if you do the rest of it yourself and you paid the $1,800 or $2,000 for an attorney to be able to draft the operating agreement correctly, because very few actually know what they're doing. Many of them are going to try to set you up a trading LLC. You want to set this up as a holding company. If you set up a trading LLC, one, you're going to have a difficult time getting a bank account, and two, you're not going to be able to take the benefit of long-term capital gains on your assets. You're also going to want to transfer this in here. You want to do it in kind. If you already hold the assets in your portfolio, you can absolutely do that. You don't have to buy a new wallet or send them from this address to that address. The way that we do it is we use it as a capital contribution. You list the wallet, the asset, the amount of the asset, the dollar amount on the day that you transfer it. I like to get that notarized. It serves as a timestamp of when that transaction took place. You could also do, an e-sign or document where, that transaction took place and it's verified and logged so that you can verify that that's when it happened. Because again, if you're not going to send a transaction on the blockchain, you really don't have something that you can point to other than when that was notarized. So I prefer it that way. Obviously, you can add more to the LLC over time if you want to continue to do that. Ideally, you are buying that through an exchange account associated with the LLC. And again, if you have questions about any of this stuff, we walk you through it step by step. Hold your hand at Digital Family Office. All you got to do is go to digitalfamilyoffice.io. And if you want to work with us, again, awesome. If you don't, you can go talk to another attorney, get quotes, look around, make sure but at least you're going to know what you're talking about when you go to talk to them now, which is really all I care about. I just want people to be educated and have the right information if they're going to go down this route. So again, if you want to work with us, we have that on our website. It's $2,000 all in. If you use the code 50OFF50 OFFDAG LLC, that's 50 OFFDAG LLC. And if you want to add a living trust, it's an additional $500, which is the cheapest you're going to find for a living trust formation in your state. There's nobody that will do it as cheap as we do. And that is going to increase here in the near future. So again, if you want to set that up, I would encourage you to do that, fairly quickly. Raven's Nest, my man, he says, I want to convert HBAR to XRP. Should I do this in a cold wallet or at Anchorage? What are the benefits, pros, and cons? Well, if you did want to swap your one crypto for another, you're going to have tax implications. Now, we had Trump come out today and the state, or actually it was yesterday evening. He was like, yeah, credit cards capped at 10%, no tax on crypto. Cool. I would love that here in 2026. Until that happens, I'm going to continue to operate as though they are capital assets. And there is, long-term capital gains or short-term capital gains on the investment. So with all that being said, if you're going to swap your HBAR for XRP, if you have capital gains or capital losses, you just need to understand what those are. So you would look at the basis or what you bought the HBAR for, and then the change in the dollar amount that you currently have invested there. If you do make that transaction, even if it is for another crypto, it's still a taxable event. Some people think, it kind of operates like real estate and you can do a 1031 exchange. Doesn't work that way. Any transaction, swap, exchange of crypto for any other asset is a taxable event. But it could be good. Like if you paid more for your HBAR and you're down, you're locking in a capital loss. So when you swap it for the other crypto, you're going to get money back from the government. Now, you're down on your investment, but if you think that the other could perform better than that, then it makes sense that you would probably swap it. Now, again, it's probably a good time for my disclaimer. Nothing here is financial advice. Only for entertainment and educational purposes. Only. And you should always consult with a tax professional, attorney, or financial advisor before making any tax legal decisions or financial decisions. My opinions are my opinions. They are not the opinion of the firm, Digital Ascension Group, or its subsidiary Digital Wealth Partners, which is an SEC registered RIA. And if you do want financial advice, you can go talk to them. They have the credentials. They have Series 65, 7, 63, 66, all the fun stuff to be able to actually advise you and give you the information you need to be able to manage your portfolio. And again, only people in the world that really do that. If you want to book a time with one of our advisors, it's a couple $100, and they will give you actual financial advice about your portfolio in your crypto. And that's for anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a client or not. You can pay that and get a consult. If you do have at least 50,000 XRP, or if you have at least $500,000 in your total portfolio for your digital assets and your traditional assets, they can work with you there. Second question, the bearded boat guy. He says, if I gift the LLC into a Dynasty trust, can I still get yield and price range for Dynasty trust? About 20 grand, 20, 25 grand for a Dynasty trust if it's structured correctly. We've seen people do them in Wyoming, South Dakota, Nevada. Those three states tend to be the most popular if you're going to stay onshore with an asset protection trust or a Dynasty trust. Can you still get yield? So you'd be able to borrow against it. You'd be able to take assets out of it as long as you're not paying off creditors. ideally you're going to be loaning against it, would be the way that you would extract liquidity from it. And the assets would be put to work in a way where they're able to service the debt and grow over time inside the Dynasty Trust. Now, what you could do is manage the LLC that's owned by the Dynasty Trust that manages the digital assets. And you can absolutely pay yourself a salary. And you can also structure things in a way when you want to be able to, pull down liquidity and do other stuff in the operating agreement. As long as you're working with good attorneys that will help you structure it the right way, absolutely, you can access liquidity, get cash flow, income, all that stuff. It just needs to be structured the right way. So hopefully you're working with the right people. Again, if you need those resources, we're happy to provide them. We, do a lot of that stuff in-house at Digital Family Office, but we will also, give you recommendations on other attorneys that you can go chat with and, see if it's a good fit for you. And again, we just want to educate people on everything so that, whether it's with us or somebody else, you have the knowledge and expertise to be able to understand, what's going on. All right. We've got a if6mf. Let's see here. There we go. All right. They say Gandalf, overseer of the One Ring. Any Evernorth Shaman Tinfoil Hat news? I have 200 shares and 4,200 warrants of Evernorth inside a Roth IRA. Is this the monster I think it will be? NDAs. I feel like Evernorth will do very well over the long term. They've raised $1 billion and bought XRP in a really good spot here. And a lot of that was donated in kind from multiple parties. Obviously, they started with Arrington's fund, and then they had some additional contribution from Chris Larson and some other large bodies that contributed XRP or deposited cash with them to be able to buy more XRP. They did get to the billion. The SPAC is not through yet. I think that their SPAC will finalize at some point here in Q1, and I think it'll be timed really well with how things kind of play out here. Timing's really interesting with Ripple and all the stuff that they do. So all that being said, I don't know. You mentioned how many shares you have. I think it was trading at like 10 or 11 bucks the last time I saw. They already changed the ticker, but again, the SPAC is not closed. All I can talk to is an experience that I had with the SPAC. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about that. It was good, and this one could be very good also. But again, nothing's guaranteed. We'll have to see how things play out. The SPAC that I participated in was Nikola. So I don't know if you guys remember that one or not. That was in 20. And this was a small investment that I made. The majority of my money, again, was in Tesla, Amazon, Google, Facebook. But I did try to trade and do some other stuff with a little bit of money. I got into that stock when it was 12 bucks, right after they had announced that they were going to have the SPAC where they were going to acquire Nikola and Nikola would be public. Obviously, looking back on that, that was a scam. They didn't have the hydrogen truck that they said they had. The video that they had pushed it up to the top of a hill and let it roll down. It was not a functioning product, but they sold it. It looked really good. And because of that, there was a lot of speculation on the stock and ended up running up to 75 bucks before it collapsed back down to below what it was when I originally invested. Luckily, I had divested around 50 bucks. I was like, this did great. I'm out of here. This is way faster than I thought I was going to make this money. And that ended up working out for me. And I know a lot of other people that did not divest and thought it was going to be a long-term investment. At this point in my investing career, I am a long-term investor, 4 or 5 years. I would, and that sounds like you are too. It sounds like you've got these shares, you've got these warrants, and you're looking for the long term on this. So, I would hang out 4, 5, 6 years, maybe longer, see what dividends are paid off of Evernorth. I do think that there's going to be dividends because of the way they're going to structure the investments and their products. I do think that they'll probably do some at the market products for preferred shares in order to be able to draw down additional debt to continue to buy XRP over the long term. And I think that they're going to be a very unique vehicle for people to be able to get access to XRP. Right now, we talked to a group the other day from Canada. Canadians can only buy up to $30,000 worth of XRP. There are 4 other assets that they can buy a bunch of. Can't buy more than 30 grand worth of XRP in a single year. So for them, these structured products and financial products that are listed on the stock exchange through the ETFs or, a DAT or something else are really kind of their only opportunity to get significant exposure to some of these assets, including XRP. So, if governments are going to limit people like that, I think that they'll be, and again, I've said this before, until we built what we built, the institutions had no intention of custodying this directly for people. They were going to build structured products. They were going to funnel you into those. I still think that there will be solutions that allow people to invest stuff in kind through the DeFi applications. And I think there'll be 2 pieces of legislation. I think that there'll be the Clarity Act, and I think there's going to be a separate DeFi bill that they try to push through. I don't know, if I do think that the Clarity Act will probably get passed here in 26 at some point. And then the DeFi bill, I don't think would be too far after that, but those things could get kicked out again, Q3, Q4 here in 2026 because of where things are at in the government, the midterms, the government shutdown, the funding. If they don't get the Clarity Act through here by the 26th, really, it's not looking good for its ability to get passed in early 26. It's likely going to be much further out. All right. We've got 7U a bunch of times. They say, Jake, what do you tell people we do for a living if we retire after price appreciation? Serious question. Say whatever you want. You say you're retired. Most people are like, oh, okay, cool. You're retired. So you must have invested in something or done something to be able to have passive income to cover your bills. My definition of financially free is you make twice as much money as you need each month for your bills from passive income. So you don't have to be a multi-millionaire to do that, especially if you live cheap. Let's say you make, you could live on $30,000 a year. Not very many people can do that. If your house is paid for and a bunch of other stuff is you're debt free, you could get by on that. You're not going to be living large, but if you made, so let's call it, let's say you lived in Arkansas. Okay. So just roll with me for a second. My business partner, Max Avery, lives up there. The median income and average, person makes somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 a year where he lives. So again, you're going to be living in Oklahoma or middle America if you're doing this. You're not going to be living on the coast. You're not going to be living in a big city, but you could live on, $120,000 a year, fairly easy in those parts of the country. And that could be twice your bills. You could live on $60,000, and if you're making 120, then that's twice that amount. Now, to do that, if you're getting 10% on your money, you need $1.2 million. If you're getting 5% on your money, you need $2.4 million. There's a lot of people that are like that. They've retired. That's what they're doing. They got in the right stocks and things. Now, you can really tell people whatever you want. I would tend to focus on whatever gives me fulfillment. So if you set up a nonprofit and you're the director of that nonprofit, or, we help people in our community, we give to our church, we, we're working on this or working on that. We're an investment group. I'll say this, going to these conferences, we are a multifamily office. We do make allocations. We've done private equity. We do early stage. primarily on the private equity stuff. Had a call today with a really cool technology about that. And we get a lot of deal flow and access to stuff because of that. However, the downside, when I go to these conferences and people ask me what I do, and I say I'm the director for Digital Ascension Group, we're a multifamily office, it draws a lot of attention, and sometimes it is unwanted attention. People start to pitch you and like ask for money. Ideally, you would say I work for a large company that manages assets. They're an asset manager. And you can kind of leave it pretty vague. And if people want the nitty gritty, you're just like, we take money and put it somewhere to make more money. And I don't know the principles of this thing. I just work there. Or the principals are really cool people. You don't have to say that it's you. So anyway, any of those answers I think would be fine. I think a lot of people will probably do the Homer and like slide into the bushes, just disappear on a lot of social media platforms and stuff. Miguel, he says, Big Brother Jake, what's going on, Miguel? He says, been hearing a lot that X money is going to be the go-to coin. What's your standing behind that? How does that compete with XRP? So a lot of these large fintechs and social media platforms are absolutely going to launch their own stablecoin. And it may even be consumer facing. The downside of the stablecoins that they issue for consumers, you're not going to be able to earn interest on it. They're going to be able to earn a lot of money on it. You're not going to be able to earn any money on it. Tokenized deposits are going to be a bit different. And those do allow people to generate interest on those accounts. I think that X Money probably goes the tokenized deposit route. And they leverage another, distributed ledger technology to be able to settle those accounts. And you'll have an X address or, a cash address that is your handle over there that you can then send people money from, and people can send money to you on, right? I got a cool one. Mine is beyond_broke over there on X. So excited about that for the money handle. But all that being said, there's going to need to be a value transfer mechanism between counterparties. If both parties want to receive the same thing and they're inside the same infrastructure, you probably don't need an intermediary. You'll still need something for intra-bank settlement, which the stable coins that they're going to issue will facilitate. But if it's so if I'm sending from X to Facebook or Facebook to Google or to my Apple wallet or whatever, there's going to be, a neutral bridge asset that value flows over, which I do think will be Hyperledger, probably XLM in a retail capacity or merchant services capacity. For back-end settlement for institutions and markets and derivatives, that's where XRP shines. So, I think that's the differentiator. I think that the majority of consumers will be using Hyperledger BOSU or another derivative of Hyperledger. And it's really not even competition in my mind, because there's really not anything else that competes. They can compete with XRP for back-end settlement of institutional flows. Discipline says, F everyone doubting Jake, discipline yourself. Appreciate that, my man. I posted on Twitter my track record. Look, I got the price at the end of 2025 for XRP wrong. Can't get them all, but my batting average is really good. Like all the events and stuff that I've called have been spot on. So I'm going to stick with that. And when all of the events play out, we will see the high price for XRP that a lot of people are looking for, in my personal opinion. Again, take it with a grain of salt. I obviously have biases. I'm just one dude on the internet. Go listen to a bunch of other people, make your own decisions, do your own due diligence and research before you make your investments. I'm not here to sway you one way or another. I'm just going to talk about my personal thesis and my personal investments. And if you want to take that into account, that is your prerogative. All right. Mike, my man, he says, hi from Canada. Quick question. Do you know how trusts work in Canada? Before I call Aaron in Toronto, can't wait for the 1K XRP so I can retire. Take care of my son. Thanks again. God bless you and your family. Thank you, Mike. So trusts in Canada are definitely different than those here in the US. There's still a gift tax in Canada, but there's some specific nuance. A lot of the people that we work with structure trust offshore in Cayman or Bermuda if they live there in Canada. We've had other people move to Dubai and the UAE, and we can help you structure stuff there. Many people don't want to leave the region, right? And that's understandable. You can gift a lot there in Canada. There is no lifetime gift tax exemption like you have here in the US. There's no threshold. So as long as you don't meet certain qualifications, you can gift a lot. Now, the government's smart, and they have put a lot of things in place to be able to make sure that they're getting their piece. I think similar to the UK and Australia, when you gift into a trust, it is a taxable event. There's a change in basis and step up. So we have just opened up the ability for individuals that are international to work with digital wealth partners. So if you are Canadian, you want access to institutional custody and the products that they have there, would highly recommend reaching out to Digital Wealth Partners. Just go to digitalwealthpartners.net, use the contact us form. It's still a manual process today, but they're looking to automate that by the end of the week. So if you want to give them till this time next week, next Monday, it's going to be a much faster and easier thing for them. But if you do want to reach out and start that process and have the conversation at least, they can absolutely have it with you. So that's our current, stopgap for people, because we have had a lot of people that do want to participate in all of that, but have had a hard time setting up a corporation. LLCs are not recognized by Canada. And so therefore, they're taxed at the LLC level here domestically and then taxed again there in Canada. That sucks. Setting up a C Corp here in the US, caps that at 20%, but you're still getting taxed twice. I do think that a trust in Canada or trust in Cayman or Bermuda is probably your best bet if you are Canadian. But again, like you mentioned, I would reach out to Aaron Grinhaus and talk to him. He is, our trusted partner there in Canada for structuring estate, mitigating taxes. He has a deep understanding of digital assets alongside, tax law, domestic here in the US and internationally in Canada. And he can walk you through, what's going to be best for you and your family over the long term. If you tell him where you want to end up being and how much you think you're going to have. And his email, if you want to go check him out, is Aaron at AARON, Aaron at grinhauslaw.ca. All right, scrolling on down to the next super chat. We got Steven. How are you, sir? He says, hey, Jake, I know you're not a fan of selling XRP, but when price appreciates, what's the best way to sell? I know you said something once before about OTC, and always will you have to pay long-term capital gains and federal. If Trump gets his way, you won't have to pay capital gains. You won't have to pay tax on your crypto, which is going to be awesome. But until we actually get, an executive order or Congress passes a law, I'm not holding my breath. I would love it, just like everybody else, believe me. I would also love if they end the Fed, which some crazy stuff going on there right now too. So things might be moving that direction before the end of Trump's term. But your question here is about selling your XRP or your digital assets. OTC desks are going to be your best bet on that for the cost of doing that, especially for large values. You probably don't want to use a broker service that's going to charge you large fees. And there's a lot of them out there. It's not like it's just one that's doing that. Most people have accounts with those. I would say, like Uphold as an example. A lot of people may have an account with Uphold and they're used to high trading fees with Uphold because they are. But if you use their Ascent platform, they do have an institutional desk where their OTC trades happen, and you can get trades for XRP as low as 10, 20, 15, 25 bips. Just depends on the liquidity and what's available and the size of the trade. So it's going to be $250,000 or more, right? So if you do have, significant appreciation, you're going to take a large amount of, profit. That would probably be the way to do it. If you're working with digital wealth partners, it's always going to be 20 bips. And the difference between us and Uphold or another broker is there's no spread ever. So it is at the market, whatever the price is, plus 20 bips. So the lowest trading cost that you're going to find out there working with digital wealth partners and Anchorage. So that's the way that I'm going to be doing it if I take profit. I don't plan to do that. Like you said, I'd rather just borrow against mine. Over the long term, I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to fund insurance policies in kind. We got to get some legislation changed in order to be able to do that. We're advocating for it. And there'll be some other means to be able to get, your XRP into tax deferred or tax free vehicles, or be able to generate returns on it without having to sell it. We have some cool products coming to market here in 2026 that I can't wait to share with you guys. My team has told me to hold off until we can make the PR announcements. So, but all that being said, that would be the way that I would go about it, either through an OTC desk. Kraken has an OTC desk. Uphold has an OTC desk. Coinbase has an OTC desk, and Digital Wealth Partners also. We can get you the lowest cost there. We've got Sam, my man. He says, Legendindo. El Legendindo. Sam on the night shift. Just a thank you for all the info and lives. Keep doing you as always. Please tune in. Always tune in on my 3 a.m. break. Golly. Thank you for the kind words, my man. He's got sent €5. So it is dark 30 there for you, Sam. Appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come hang out and ask good questions, and for the super chat. Jesse, my man, he said, actually, this is Carlos. I clicked the wrong one. Carlos says, Jake the Honey Badger. What comes first, tariff crisis or reverse carry trade? Tariff crisis. So, with the conflicts that are going on in the Middle East there and the destabilization of the government in Iran, there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going on there. And if we do, put a 25% tariff on them, I think that it just exacerbates that problem. I do think there'll be retaliation. There was a Bloomberg article talking about the Strait of Hormuz potentially being shut down again. Feeling more and more confident that that's probably going to be the catalyst for the spike in oil or yen, the spike in oil priced in yen and then yen as they raise interest rates there in Japan. So that would then be the catalyst for the reverse carry trade. So the tariffs, I do think, will come first. There'll be retaliation and issues, and then we'll see everything else, wind down from there. Jesse, here we go. He says, Jake, from New Braunfels. Awesome, dude. Floated the river down there. Not that well. It's been a while, actually. If you guys haven't ever been to New Braunfels or San Antonio here in Texas, highly recommend. Go down there, float the river. It's a good time. He says, I am a DWP member, wanting to purchase another 20,000 XRP. Should I purchase them through Anchorage? Don't really trust the exchanges. Keep hearing supply is running low. So Anchorage would be able to source those for you. They work with the very institutional trading desk. And again, the cost on that's going to be cheaper than anywhere else. So if you have an account there, I would recommend talking to your advisor. You would wire the money over, and then they would execute that trade for you, and you would see those XRP in your account there through the securitized platform, which has now been bought by Anchorage, which is pretty cool. Big stuff coming for Anchorage at the end of Q1 also. Average golfers in Idaho. What's up, man? He says, Jake, what's your thoughts on the Clarity Act getting kicked to the end of the month? I'm worried it will get pushed out even more if we end up with the government shutdown. Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. But we don't need the Clarity Act. I've said this lots of times. XRP in and of itself is not a security here in the US. We were given that clarity on July 13th in 2023 by Judge Torres there in the Ripple and SEC lawsuit. Obviously Ripple did have to settle for $50 million and pay fines, for their early sales of XRP. But again, that locked in those pre-negotiated contracts. They have 1,700 NDAs. Nobody will ever be able to replicate what Ripple has done at this point, especially on the other side of the Clarity Act being passed, because no company is ever going to be able to retain or hold more than 20% of the total token supply. So again, all of these things build a significant moat for Ripple and XRP. And all that being said, I don't think we need the Clarity Act for XRP's adoption here domestically in the US. And the reason I feel that way is, again, a lot of the conversations that I've had, one that I alluded to earlier with R3. Patrick, he said, if I had 2,000 XRP and I trust Roth, would it be safe in 5 years? Yeah, I trust is fine. I don't think they're going anywhere. They have strong controls over there. They have regulatory oversight. They do use Fireblocks, I believe, for their infrastructure and custody. They don't use a qualified custodian like we do at Anchorage. Now they could move to BitGo, right? BitGo also uses that infrastructure and has segregated accounts. They have insurance there at BitGo. So I think it's safe. I know that Bitcoin IRA, when I used them, this was a long time ago, they were working with Digital Trust and they had the assets held on ledgers in level 4 facilities, and you could only trade things a few times a day, and they would go in there and execute the trade for you at 4 p.m. An actual person would go in there and see your keys. And that's why you couldn't get the they couldn't get the insurance, the crime insurance that a lot of these other institutional custodians have. So I don't know the specific mechanics behind iTrust. My best guess is that they use Fireblocks. And again, not a bad technology. It's just not the same level of security that you're going to get with Anchorage. So we have seen some people move their accounts from iTrust over to us. We do have a product to be able to generate returns on your XRP inside of your Roth IRA that will be live here in the next week or two that we're going to be rolling out to our clients. So if you want an algorithmic trading strategy that you don't have to think about, that compounds your XRP for you inside of your IRA, whether that's a Roth that's tax-free or just a traditional Roth that's tax deferred, Digital Wealth Partners is first to market with that. So again, there's a lot of other good providers out there. iTrust is one of those, Bitcoin IRA, and then there's lots of people that will do an IRA product for your XRP or your digital assets. I think if you have exposure inside of your Roth or your traditional IRA or your SEP IRA or whatever other type of IRA that you have, you're doing awesome. And it doesn't really matter who you park it with. We're going to continue to roll out solutions and products and bring those to market in the way that we think best benefits our clients. And again, you can move those assets over in kind to us if that's something you're interested in. Not advocating for or against that. I would reach out to our team, have a conversation to make sure it's a good fit before you start that process. All right, let's see here. This person's asked, can I hold XRP within my LLC in my Uphold vault? Yes. Your Uphold vault would have a wallet address that you can list on the capital contributions page. And again, our team at Digital Family Office can absolutely help you figure all of that out. Bad financial decisions. He says, Jake, the legend. What's up, my dude? He says, last night you said something about no capital gains on crypto. Can you give more clarification for us? So Big Daddy Trump says no capital gains on crypto and no more than 10% interest on credit cards. And he says by the end of the month, people that are doing those things are going to be, committing illegal activities or against the law. So we'll see. He's going to have to sign an executive order. We're going to have to get actually, some congressional legislation passed in order for that to happen. But if he does sign an executive order, then there's going to be so many people that flock here to the U.S. To be able to launch projects, and it's going to significantly increase the adoption of crypto domestically if they were to go that route. I'm advocating for it. I absolutely want it, but again, until we get that assurance and that's signed into law, we have to continue to operate in the paradigm that exists today, which is crypto are capital assets and should be treated as such under the current tax laws for the IRS. We got Info Man One says, I'd love to know what BlackRock and Ripple are up to. It's got to be huge. Huge. It is huge. For real though, I'm making light of that, but like, I don't really think that most people, even if you are bullish on XRP and you understand what's going on here, the gravity of the financial paradigm shift that we are in the middle of, I don't think I even understand how big it is. And I talk to these people, I see what's going on. We're building financial products. We're on the bleeding edge of all of this. And I still don't think I understand the full breadth and gravity of what is about to happen with the implementation of this. So to your point, this is the biggest thing that will happen in our lifetimes. And I know, being a 34-year-old white male, a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, you're silly. There's a lot of people that are older than me that are much wiser than I am. I think people will look back at what likely will occur in the not too distant future when we do see the implementation of distributed ledger technology on the back end of the stock market and for other applications. And it will be as big, if not larger than the internet when that all occurred, over the 15, 20-year span between the 1990s and the early 2000s. I think that this will be, we're already, 17 years in for Bitcoin? Yeah, it's been that long. Can you believe that? Just the other day, January 3rd, was the first block mined for Bitcoin. It's also David Schwartz's last day at Ripple. Interesting. Anyway, all that being said, I do think that we're right in the middle of the largest wealth transfer that we will see in our lifetimes and probably our kids' lifetimes. And you're here, you're participating. So kudos to you if you're watching this. And again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening to come hang out with me, ask good questions, and run it down. We got Rockin' HL80. He says, give us your rundown on X post. You left a meme comment about there only being roughly 80 or 98 million XRP on OTC. Prayers to you, Jake. Thank you, man. I appreciate the prayers. Prayers to you guys. We have a lot of good clients and a lot of good people, and I pray for a lot of people on a consistent basis. So I appreciate when others pray for me. For the OTC desk, obviously that post was taken down. I think that lady just received a lot of criticism for that. In my conversations with OTC desks, dark pools, and exchanges, I feel like that's not too far off. Now, she gave a very exact number. Difficult to really pin that down unless you did talk to all the OTC desks and say, hey, what's the available supply, and added it all up. If I was, and I am a betting man, and I lost my last bet. So if that tells you anything, maybe this isn't as good information or intel as you're wanting. But if I was a betting man, I would say, maybe double what she said. Around 200 million is what I believe is available on OTC desk. It could be more, it could be less. But what a lot of people don't comprehend, and a lot of people look at on-chain analytics and wallet addresses and try to determine what the available supply is. Circulating supply and available supply are two very different things. once you send assets into an exchange, the XRP ledger is not the source of truth anymore. They have an overlay or an accounting mechanism that what they get audited on. And they will appropriate the amount of XRP held in different wallets for different reasons. And they can lock it and separate it and do whatever they need to. So, you know, and most exchanges have multiple wallets. So some of those wallets are going to be for retail, holding it, you know, in a pooled deal. Some of it's going to be diversified over multiple wallets to be able to be below the insurance thresholds that they have for, you know, whatever their insurance is. There's a lot of reasons that you might diversify assets across multiple wallets, but have an overlay and an accounting mechanism that had much lower amounts available for specific things inside of an exchange. Other people don't know that because other people don't deal with exchanges. They just work with DeFi. And so that's what they're used to dealing with. And they view the ledger as the source of truth. I get that. Believe me, I do. But I work with all of these other people. And so I have a much more in-depth understanding of how it actually works in their system and why, you know, there's a discrepancy between the on-chain analytics and what the actual available supply is. So yeah, I could be that, could be double it. We've got Jason, my man. He says, Jake, why go through all the trouble of filing a defamation lawsuit? We all know you're right directionally about XRP, but your timing was off. Why do this considering how hard it is to prove ill intent? So look, this wasn't done lightly. It's really the reputational damage that's been done to myself, the businesses, our clients, and our partners. If, you know, everything there had been true and it wasn't defamation and he hadn't said that we were lying or committing fraud, it'd been fine. I haven't tried to hide anything. I've addressed all this stuff multiple times. And if people want to go look at the other lawsuit, you can, it's public record, like Zach said. But at the end of the day, you know, what was done has caused problems. And because of that, we decided to take legal action against him. And again, we'll see how it works out. I'm going to leave it to the attorneys. We're going to leave it to the court. If you want to understand exactly, you know, why we filed and what we filed for, you can go read the court documents. And wish him the best in this deal. But we need to make sure that our reputation is upheld. And if anybody's going to defame us or say that we're committing fraud or doing anything that's, you know, illicit or illegal, like, we have very high regulatory standards that we have to meet. Very high. And we've done everything that we possibly can to operate at the highest level of standard and scrutiny. Nobody else is doing this. There's a reason for it, right? We've taken a big risk. And for somebody to come out and do that, again, you can read the documents. I'm going to leave it to the attorneys. And I do think that we're going to be right about XRP, right? And I don't want to divide the community. That's not my intent with this. But actions have repercussions. And I do think that we're, you know, again, we brought the case because we're confident we're going to win. The videos have been removed. There's, you know, again, I'll leave it to the attorneys to run things down. So anyway, all that being said, I'm with you. It's not something that I'm enjoying. It's going to be a lot of time and money and effort, but it is what needs done. All right, next super chat, my man, Mr. Paul. He says, the Clarity Act has been delayed until the end of the month now. Everybody's got the same question. Do you have any info as to why, or do you think they just don't have the votes? I don't have any info as to why. I can tell you when I was on Capitol Hill last year, people did not think that the Clarity Act would get passed in 25. And I shared that information with you guys. You know, I said, look, I think the Genius Act is going to get passed, and, you know, that the Clarity Act is going to probably be moved to 2026. And that's exactly what happened. senators there that were on Capitol Hill, or congressmen and ladies that we talked to, they just didn't feel as strongly about that when they thought that it needed more work. And obviously, you know, that was the case. It passed the House and went to the Senate and didn't make it through because, you know, they didn't agree on things. So all that being said, I don't know when it's going to end up getting passed. I do believe it's going to get passed at some point, but with the delay, it's not looking likely that it would happen in Q1 unless they can get it done by like the 26th this month. So they have 14 days here. They got 2 weeks that they could, you know, mark it up, hash it out, get it passed. But again, I have made a statement on Twitter that my prediction is that XRP will appreciate before the Clarity Act gets passed. And right now, like I stated earlier, XRP has a moat. If the Clarity Act gets passed, there are other assets that have similar characteristics that could compete. I still think that XRP would edge them out because of the compliance that's built into the network and a lot of the amendments that have been passed on chain with digital identity and credentials and a lot of the other stuff that's native to the network that doesn't require some outside source. All that being said, though, I feel very strongly that XRP will appreciate before the Clarity Act is passed. All right, we got a couple more over here. I don't know how to, 3101, they say, if someone has a bag already to onboard with DWP in the future, what are the ups and downs to getting a wallet and a bag under a construction company to use? Ooh, you always want to silo risk. Okay, so if you're using a construction company, it's the treasury for your construction company. Even if you do have a construction company, you should have 2 LLCs. Okay, unless you lease all your equipment. If you lease all your equipment, then you're just going to have the service company. Doesn't matter. Whatever service company should be leasing the equipment, because if anything bad happens and it's above the insurance that you cover, you know, what your insurance covers you for, somebody's going to be able to come after you for the other assets inside that corporation. If it's a service company and you're leasing the assets from your holding company, they can't come after these assets in the holding company because they're a separate company and you have limited liability with the service company. So ideally, you don't have digital assets in either one, for sure not the service company, maybe the holding company as a treasury. But ideally it's segregated into its own LLC, separate of other stuff, just like real estate. Like you wouldn't hold real estate in the same LLC as your operating company, because again, if somebody sues you or somebody falls on the property or anything happens, that property can then be taken in the lawsuit. So you want to limit that liability. So personally, I would parse that out. I would segregate it. And if you don't have your assets separated from your service company today, I would highly recommend working with an estate planner or a tax attorney to structure that appropriately to be able to mitigate the risk of loss of those assets. If you do have heavy equipment, obviously you're getting, you know, the Section 179 deductions. You're able to write that off, which is awesome. But you probably want that in a separate company that you're leasing to your service company in case you hit, you know, a gas line or a water line or fiber or whatever else that causes problems and you get sued or you have losses. Your employee could be driving the company truck that rear ends somebody. There's just so many circumstances in that type of business where you can have problems. And so I would highly recommend segregating your assets out away from that. Ken Moss, my man, he says, hey, Jake, did you see Brad's latest tweet? Wording change from building the internet of value to enabling the internet of value. I didn't catch that, but that's actually very interesting that you state it that way, because the internet of value is here. Like I think 2026 is going to be the year of the Cambrian explosion. That is going to require all of these macroeconomic events that I've been discussing for almost 2 years to play out. But it looks highly likely, again, looked very likely at the end of last year, and that's why I was as confident as I was. But we are here into 2026, and I've been right about a lot of things, like a lot of things. just a little bit off on the timing. So I'm with you. I'm excited. I do think that things will work out in our favor as things progress here. Gamer God 796 says, "Hey Jake, every live you do, I learned something pretty substantial. Until price appreciation, I'm good with any education until. Thanks for all that you've done." Thank you for the super chat and the kind words. I try to, like, it's taken me a long time to aggregate the amount of knowledge and expertise that I have, and if I'm able to impart that or share that with other people so that they don't have to make the same mistakes I did, or have to fight and claw and dig in order to be able to find this stuff, I'm happy to do it. I get a lot of fulfillment from it. I love coming on here and, again, answering great questions from great people. So thank y'all. The Jaybird, he says, "Can you go into how the banks are trying to take control over digital assets, try to reopen the Genius Act to take away rewards? Is there anything we need to watch for in the Clarity Act, making distributed ledger technology and blockchain into centralized?" You're not going to like my answer. Again, this is kind of like the political front for me. I'm middle of the road. Like, there's a lot of people that are libertarian freedom fighters, and then there's other people that are like completely centralized. There should be no open source stuff. I'm in the middle. I think that there's a happy marriage between the two. I don't think it'll be completely centralized. I think there'll be multiple parties verifying the same information, and it'll be transparent and open and verifiable. But you need oversight, you need liability, you need accountability if something goes wrong. And right now we don't have that in DeFi or a lot of these applications, these open source protocols. Anybody can participate and anybody can take money from other people with no recourse. If they're international, good luck. Like, you're not gonna be able to get your stuff. So, if there are liquidity pools, AMMs, other opportunities to be able to generate yield on chain, there needs to be regulatory oversight. There needs to be somebody managing that stuff, whether that's a broker dealer or an RIA or the SEC or FINRA, or if it's in another jurisdiction and it's the VARA or the DIFC or any other regulatory body. One, they need visibility into these ecosystems to be able to identify who's participating. Permission domains and permission decks, on the XRPL, I think, are instrumental to the adoption of the XRPL at scale. Where are we at on that? Let's take a look right now. If you guys don't know, you can go to XRP scan /amendments and see where the amendments are for votes happening real time. We are currently at 24 and 25 votes for all of the fixes to be implemented on the network. We're still waiting on another 3 to 4 votes on each one of those. We have to get to 28 total votes before there's a 2-week waiting period for those to get implemented. The other ones that are sitting below that probably aren't going to get passed until they push the fixes through. So permission domain and permission decks, token escrow, and batch. Many of those are already over halfway to where they need to be in order to be implemented on chain. But again, they need at least an 80% +1 consensus from the validators on the network. And then there's a 2-week cool-off period or waiting period before they're actually implemented. And then they check for bugs and all kinds of stuff to make sure that it's not going to be a problem on the mainnet. So, with all that being said, them kicking the Clarity Act out, I do believe, gives more time for the XRPL to get to the state where it can be the de facto solution for institutions. How much longer do they need? Well, again, these amendments take at least 2 weeks to get passed. Do these amendments have to be passed before price appreciation for XRP? No. So the other misnomer that a lot of people have, Project Ion, which was developed between the DTCC and R3 and finalized in August of 2022, uses Corda. Corda already has all of this stuff. It knows exactly who's participating in the environments. They're all permissioned environments, but you need some way to settle between those permissioned environments. So all the clearinghouses and all the brokers could run a permission environment in Corda, and then settle payment flows real time T+0 and reconcile all of the trades between the clearinghouses and the broker using Project Ion and settling through XRP, as long as there's enough liquidity in it. Because the smart contracts are built into Corda. They don't have to be on the XRPL. So again, we could see significant price appreciation and usage of XRP through Corda and Ripple and other counterparties and their private permissioned ecosystems on the network before we get an open, decentralized application where other counterparties can build stuff and participate in financial models and stuff. And I do think that in 2026, we will see, one of my predictions for 26 is we are going to get XLS 64, 65, and 66 passed. That's pseudo accounts, liquidity pools, and borrow lend native on chain on the XRPL. I do think that liquidity pools will probably be securities offerings domestically here in the US. I think that they're going to require oversight. I think that there will be a manager of these that likely is an investment company that has the licenses to be able to do so. And, you know, there'll probably be AMMs probably will require a broker-dealer's oversight. And you're going to want purview for the SEC or FINRA to be able to audit stuff if they need to. I don't think that they need to be doing it all the time, but I think if they have access to a node inside these environments or on-chain, they'll be able to verify and look at stuff if they need to. So that's my 2 cents. That's my prediction for 2026 is we are going to see those things live on the XRPL. And a lot of people, you know, will be able to participate through Zaman or Zahao. Or no, it's Zaman, sorry. Zahao is the side chain that We'd Say Wins put together. He's also working on a collaboration with Flair and Hugo over there. Excited to see that. What I'm really excited about is the marriage of institutional custody and DeFi applications, so that you get the assurances of insurance and oversight and safety for your assets while still getting to participate and generate yield and, you know, foster liquidity in different environments to your choosing. Like that's going to be the other cool part, that people that have a lot of liquidity in XRP, you're going to be able to seed different things like Evernorth with your XRP. And it's definitely something that Digital Wealth Partners are going to be looking at, you know, almost $1 billion in AUM over there. The majority of which again is in XRP. So shout out to those guys at Digital Wealth Partners. Rickaroo says, just a thank you for all that you do for us and a little something for more tea. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Cheers. Hope you and your wife and your family are having a great new year so far. About an hour and a half in, we'll hang out for another, call it 15 minutes or so before we wrap it up tonight. We got Silent Collection. They say, I rubbed my magic lamp and out popped Jake. My question is, I don't own my home. What's price appreciation? Should I sell enough to buy one? Don't need much. And then join DWP. I prayed for the world today, including you. Thank you, man. The world needs it. The world needs more prayer. Should you own a home? I mean, that's like it's kind of like everybody's dream. You know what I mean? Like they sell it to you that way. A home is not an asset. Now, I'll say this about a home. It can provide you a sense of stability, even though you're still going to have to pay the taxes and other stuff on it, right? If you own it outright, even in a bankruptcy, they can't take that away from you. So it does provide. A lot of people don't ever get past survival, and to do that, like you need to make sure that you have food. You need to make sure that you have, you know, things that are necessary for survival. One of those is a shelter. So, you know, some people feel the need to purchase a home. My wife is one of those people, and we will be buying a house when all of it plays out. if it was up to me, it's going to sound silly. I look at things more like a hermit crab. You get what you need when you need it, and whatever fits at the time. And you can do that by renting just fine. I would rather personally, again, make sure my wife is happy. Happy wife, happy life. But ideally, you want to purchase assets that cash flow. So again, XRP can be one of those. If you're working with digital wealth partners and you're getting cash flow off of that, you could lease a very nice house with the cash flow off of your XRP, or you could save up for a little while and put a down payment on a multifamily property that you financed and structured the right way to be able to get additional cash flow to be able to cover, the debt service on a house that you're buying later. I think a lot of people would do well to buy assets versus liabilities post price appreciation and understand the difference between what both of those are before making purchases. But again, like, if your peace of mind, if you have that house and it allows you to think bigger, be bigger, and operate on a larger scale, and that's what you need in order to do that, I think it's well worth it. Some people need it, some people don't. If you have a mortgage on your house right now that's like a 30-year fixed mortgage at 2.8%, you got free money. I would not pay that off. I would make the minimum payment on that dog for the rest of my life. Other people, again, just for whatever reason, they need that sense of security in order to be able to think bigger. And they want to pay, like, you're effectively making 2.8% on the money that you pay your house off with. That's a horrible return. You can put that in treasuries. You can put it pretty much anywhere else right now and generate more than 2.8%. Just my 2 cents on it, though. That is a very logical, mathematically driven way to look at it. Again, it doesn't take into account the emotion and the quality of life or mental stability that some people would prefer to have. So that's my 2 cents on it. Again, I can't give you financial advice. Work with your financial advisor. If you want to talk to Tom Teal, I just did a video with him. I would go check it out over there on YouTube, or we posted on X as well. He talks about some of that. We talk about that in the interview, about like paying off a house or structuring things or what that looks like. If you're trying to retire. The video is called "Retire on Your XRP." Damien, hey dude, he says, Jake, I'm in Alberta, and it looks like we're going to vote to leave Canada in October. Can I invest XRP with Digital Family Office through Alberta Corporation? Yeah, if you have your XRP structured in a company there, we can absolutely work with you. You'll just go through KYB or Know Your Business, and as long as you are not a terrorist, haven't committed any problems, yeah, we would love to work with you and absolutely can. Even if you move, we could still work through that corporation, or you could change it later on. We got I Am Cooper. He says, hey, Jake, did you say Digital Wealth Partners will have bank accounts? Yes, we're working on that here in Q1. If so, how would that work? Would our dividends go there and then we can spend it with cash without having to wire to the bank? Yeah, that's the whole point. So we would really like it if you had an XRP cashback card. So you can imagine maybe who partners would be for that. There's a few people out there that do that type of thing. So that's the goal, is to create a solution where people are able to generate returns on their XRP, and then if they spend that cash or ROUSD or whatever they're holding it in on their debit card, then they get additional XRP cash back with that, which would be really cool. So that's the goal. We'll see. Again, I'm hopeful for that here in Q1. Rob, my man, good to see you. He says, have you seen this? Financial Post and Bloomberg, bullish oil option volume soars to record as traders sweat Iran risk. Iran. Oil traders are lining up protection against a spike in prices at a rate never seen before. Somebody's been talking about oil rising for a long time. I don't know I think they're silly. It's going to happen. And again, like we already started to see this. People are starting to take positions, hedge, make sure that they, are going to be able to get the upside because feels, I don't want to say imminent, but close at hand. Rockaroo, we already did this one. Jaybird, I'm going to go down to the bottom and work my way back up. Make sure I didn't miss any over here. Living Legacy is always nice enough to send me super chats if I miss some of the bigger ones. I don't like when people pay and I don't answer it. If I do miss your super chat for whatever reason, because I probably will, DM us on a social media platform, or you can give it to the moderators and they will pass it to me also in the mastermind. We got Natek says, Jake, I have both the LLC and trust through your firm. Awesome, dude. Glad to be working with you. Is there someone I can chat with directly about the trust? Thank you. If you set it up through us, you should be able to contact whoever your partner at Laughlin is. And Laughlin would be able to walk you through, what's going on with your trust, how to do the assignment, other things associated with that. So you should have a rep there at Laughlin, and I would recommend reaching out to them. And if you can't get a hold of them for whatever reason, you can always just email us at support@digitalfamilyoffice.io. We got John Doe. He says, we prepare the way for King Jesus. Amen, brother. Appreciate that. I think a lot of people are ready for that. And then a lot of people aren't. XRP for the Kingdom. I love the name. Very good. They say, Jake and the Tea Lady, cheers. Question about a deferred sales trust. Does DWP write these if price appreciation hits and I need to cash out some XRP at a price and time? I would like to have a way for the trust to be drafted. We do deferred sales trust, but it's not always the best solution. An intentionally defective grantor trust and some other things may be better options. I'd consider having a conversation with Dan Plaskett. We should have an interview that comes out with him here in the near future. So he's the head architect for the estate side of our business at Digital Family Office. And he has, over 45 years worth of experience in estate planning as a tax attorney. And he can help you structure that the right way to be able to mitigate tax obligations post price appreciation, if that's something you're interested in, or if you have, something now that you would like to, put in place. We have been doing a lot more trusts lately for clients: asset protection trust, Dynasty trust, spendthrift trust, and again, intentionally defective grantor trust, ILETs. ILETs are going to be interesting. So I think that we'll be able to use premium finance and be able to borrow against your XRP and then take a stable coin like ROUSD and fund your life insurance policy. And you'll just owe the interest on that. And because it's a borrowed asset, there's no step up in basis or tax obligations when you're funding that ILET. So anyway, a lot of cool stuff that we're working on with the insurance division of Digital Wealth. Digital Ascension Group. Azure Legacy is the insurance company. If you want to learn more about term life insurance that's convertible, or infinite banking, or you have a liquidity event coming up, you're going to get a lot of cash, or you want to be able to protect yourself or set up insurance policies for your kids, do some IULs. I would highly recommend getting a time with Carl or Carson or one of the other advisors over there at Azure Legacy. You can just go to Azure Legacy, XURE legacy.com. All right. Scrolling on up. Oh, man. We've got this gentleman. He says, hey, Jake, hope all is well. If the OTC desk and dark pools are out of XRP and due to the SEC rule, institutions can't buy from Ripple directly, can institutions buy from Ripple Prime or overseas? How does XRP price move? Will move now? They have to go to the exchanges. They have to go to retail when all of that dries up. You're right. They won't be able to go to Ripple. So retail is going to be in a position with some leverage as price moves up. I've talked about this before. I don't think post price appreciation, I don't know that retail is going to be able to buy XRP. I think it'll be institutional access only. And I do think that there's going to be significant premium that's paid over the spot price for XRP. So let's say XRP is trading at, $1,500, $2,000. I think that there could be a similar situation to gold. Like gold's trading at $4,500, but you're probably paying over $5,000 an ounce for gold, physical gold at this point. And that's what XRP is. It's a bearer asset. So if you want access to the bearer asset, I think that you're probably going to have to pay a premium above and beyond the spot price, post price appreciation. Wild Bill says, is the XRP ready to handle the volume you predict? 1,500 TPS enough? Excuse me. Also, I hear privacy is an extremely important feature institutions require, and the XRPL doesn't currently have. So they're working on a zero knowledge proof component to the XRPL. To your point, absolutely, that is going to be needed for the mainnet to be adopted. But again, they can use Corda's infrastructure with private permissioned ecosystems and still settle through XRP without having to utilize the mainnet until these amendments have been passed and those things have been implemented. So when it comes to 1,500 TPS, there have been a couple times where they've pushed it to like 1,200 or up to 1,500. It's very short-lived that it's operating at that scale. It really doesn't have the throughput to operate there consistently. And anybody that tells you that does, they're wrong. Look, I'm going to be the first one to say that, okay? You're going to need an implicit or explicit subnet on the XRPL and payment channels and batching in order for XRP to be able to scale to meet the demand for, some of these larger payment providers, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, even treasury management, some of the stuff that Ripple's doing, like they're going to have a subnet that they can push stuff through. Luckily, Bob Way happens to have a patent on a subnet for the XRPL. So, yes, the answer is it will be. And it can be today using private permissioned ecosystems and side chains. But the mainnet itself is not to the point to what you mentioned here that it can be adopted at scale. But it will be. Once there's more liquidity and it starts being used and the access doors open up through the private ecosystems, then we'll see the mainnet mature, and over time people will start to just participate in the ecosystem that way versus being shielded like they are today. But they'll have zero knowledge proof, so they'll be good. Sean says, Jake the legend, what's your opinion of holding on Robinhood? Gotta be careful with what I say on stuff, because again, like other people aren't, and then you end up in lawsuits. So Robinhood's a good platform. I have seen clients have problems getting assets off there, especially in large amounts. What I've seen most common is that Robinhood will limit you to $5,000 a day that you can remove off of their platform. So if you intend to move larger amounts off their platform, I would do it early before they limit you. Almost everybody that we've seen try to like slow roll it and move stuff off slowly, they've been locked down and had a difficult time removing the rest of their assets, and it's been drawn out. So I don't think they're going anywhere. But as long as the assets remain on an exchange or with a broker, that's theirs. It's not yours. So just be aware of that. Not to say they would be malicious and take it from you, but if there's a situation where they need it, they have the right to take it if they want to. And that's why a cold wallet or institutional custody is going to be, the best way to go. In my opinion, again, just one person's opinion. Husker says, do you think the Genius Act helps keep the USD as a reserve currency and restore faith in T-bonds to avoid a currency crash? I agree with 2/3 of this. I agree that it restores faith in T-bonds and avoids the currency crash. I don't agree that it will maintain the hegemony that the dollar is seen as the reserve currency. It will help, but it's just going to prolong, really the move away from the US dollar to sovereign currencies. Japan's going to be a big move on that. We've already seen Russia do it. China's already starting to do it. Countries want to hold their own bonds and currency. They don't want to be subject to the US's guidelines and sanctions. So any way that they can de-risk and hold their own stuff and benefit their own economy, they're going to do that. But I do think that it will stop the crash. And the bond market is the backbone of the financial system, and if the bond market fails, everything else, it's Mad Max. So yes, I think that they will use it to shore that up, and it will be fine. There's about their guesstimated demand, estimated demand for stable coins here in the US and treasuries is about $2.3 trillion worth. Just so happens to be the outstanding debt globally for the US, about 2.3 trillion. Who would have thought? We've got Eggs Gamer God says, hey Jake. Oh, I already did this one. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for the super chat. Coming down to the end here. We've got Michael. He says, Jake, blessings to you and the High Queen of Tea. Do you think the Clarity Act will be passed before midterm elections? If it doesn't get passed in the next 2 weeks before the 26th, it becomes significantly less likely. Like way less likely. It could still happen. Again, my crystal ball is broken. You guys know that. I got my price prediction wrong in 2025. I don't know everything. The only thing that I'm very confident in is that XRP will appreciate before the Clarity Act gets passed. And so if they need to punt that further, I think they will. If XRP can go here, then maybe they pass it sooner. Or maybe they pass it in a crisis situation. Happy Pisces says, if ACT delayed to 2027, I'm assuming you mean the Clarity Act, yet XRP, only one with Clarity, XRP still needs support projects to work properly. So no ACT, no real growth price increase for XRP till 2027. Again, I have had enough conversations to believe the contrary to that. We do want interoperability and multi-chain, use, oracles and wormhole and Axelar and all the stuff that allows for interoperability between the XRPL and other ecosystems. Solana has a wrapped XRP. XRP will be used as collateral on a lot of these other chains, and everything will settle back to the XRPL, in my opinion. It's not really my opinion. Anyway. So no, I think that there's a huge chance that we're going to see significant price appreciation for XRP here in 2026. But again, that's predicated on macro events playing out and not the Clarity Act passing. We're going to grab one more, and then we'll wrap it up tonight. And again, if I missed your super chat, I apologize. Just DM us on social media. Or you can, again, provide it to the moderators over there in the mastermind, and they will share it to me. Ghoulis Boozier. I butchered that. Sorry, my man. He says, just curious, Kraken and Daily Spin crypto giveaways over the holidays. Guess which crypto was not on the list? That's one of the prizes at all. Wink, wink. Thank you for all that you do. Off to the moon. Yeah. They're not going to give away the most valuable thing that they own. I will take one more. Why not? We got a 589. We'll end with the 589 in the super chat. We got Ken. He said, we already went over this one. Yes, I did see Brad's tweet, but I didn't pick up on what you're laying down there, which is they moved from building the internet of value to enabling the internet of value, which again, 2026 is looking bright. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening to come hang out with me, ask great questions. Again, if you want to check out the mastermind, we would love to see you there. Closing social membership after this month. It's $25 a month there for social. If you use the code Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar, or the abbreviation for month, again, all capitalized, get you, $5 off carbon, social. So $20 for the first month. Check it out. See if it's something you want to do. Again, on the other side of the $10 XRP, we are locking it down. There will be invite only, and it'll be much, much higher price. So if you want to check that out and get your seat at the table, I would encourage you to do so. Also, if you need an LLC to be able to manage your digital assets the right way and mitigate taxes, get anonymity, and be able to get creditor protection, I would suggest, whether you work with us or not, to get it in an LLC if you have at least $50,000 to $80,000 in total portfolio value. If you want to work with us, you can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF50 OFFDAG LLC. That's 50 OFFDAG LLC. Get you everything end to end that you would ever need for your holding company to manage your digital assets. And again, you can get a living trust for just an additional $500. Cheapest place you're going to find that, period. And then last but not least, if you need a wealth manager, if you need an advisor to help you figure out your exit strategy or structure things to make sure that you're doing this the right way, post price appreciation, I would highly recommend getting a time with Digital Wealth Partners. You can go to digitalwealthpartners.net and go to the contact us form, book a call. And if you do have at least 50,000 XRP or at least $500,000 in total portfolio value, you can work with them and get your assets into Anchorage, institutional custody, get access to ways to generate returns on your XRP, lines of credit against it, and all the other fun stuff that they do over there. So with that, I'm going to wrap it. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. We'll see you guys Wednesday. Stay blessed, and we'll see you on the next one.